Hi, welcome to the Railway Laser Lines, how to build the 00 gauge fueling grids. And in this video we'll show you how to do the center fuel grid and also the extension side grids. So your nearest panel here is the center grid section. It's made up of 5 pieces. You got your main grid, you then got your 2 long pieces that will join underneath the grid, and then 2 small pieces that will fit in between the ends just to protect them, and that's as simple as that one. And then you've got your extension grids, which have your small outer grids, and then you've got 2 long sections, one that goes on the center and one that goes on the outside. Now these are a little bit tricky because all you're doing is relying on the little notches to put them in at 90 degrees, but we'll show you as we go along. Materials to use, I use the Deluxe Materials product and I use Superfatic. You can use laser card glue, rocket glue, glue and glaze. I don't recommend PVA. PVA doesn't bond quick enough for this material, so I wouldn't recommend that. You're definitely going to need a pair of tweezers because fitting these sections into the holes needs a little bit of trickery, and pushing them in with tweezers works a treat. I use cocktail sticks basically just to dip it in the glue and literally spread it along the top of the parts. You can use a brush and a blade of some kind. I tend to use zippy blades, but a nice sharp blade you'll need to cut out the parts on the template, and you'll see there are engraved lines along where you need to take them out. So that's it. So we will crack on and we'll start with the center section. So these are the 5 pieces needed, the 2 long sections that slot into the fuel grid and the 2 end dividers. So it's literally getting your glue, adding some glue to the tops of these sections at the top, grab hold of the tweezers, tip it upside down, and then also tip your fueling grid upside down, and then literally slot them in, and you'll need your tweezers basically. So once you've got hold of this and it's glue, push it in, push it in, push it in, push it in all the way along, making sure the end here and the end there is glued on in place. Once you've done that, repeat that with the other side. Once you've done that, you can then add the 2 end pieces just to keep them protected, and that's it. It's as simple as that. It's a 5-10 minute job maximum. So I'll add some glue, fit it in place, and I'll show you when I've done the first one. So by using the tweezers, it's literally pushing them into those holes all the way along, and you'll find that they should slot in nicely, and then just tip it up at an angle just to make sure that you see that it's flush, and then allow that to dry. Obviously the end pieces, just want to make sure that they are stuck, because obviously when we come to add the small end pieces you need to make sure that they fit. So I've done this one side, duplicate the second side, and then we'll add the middle parts. So we'll come back and show you. So that's both the sides done. It's literally just getting the tweezers and holding it where applicable and pushing it down, making sure you don't bend them and break them. Just go down gently and push it in place. Once it's done, you can turn it over and then just literally push it down with your fingers to make sure that they are flush fit, and you can check by looking at the angle. That's done. Once you've done that, you can then add these 2 little pieces at the end, glue those into position and run them along the sides, and it's done. So I'll just add those and I'll come back when that's done. Right, so the end parts are glued on, and that is it. That's all you need to do. And obviously then you need to paint this in the colour of your choice, and I would recommend that you paint both sides, because obviously you may well be able to see underneath. So I tend to spray the underside first, and I use a matte black, and I've got one here that I did before. You might want to do a silver and then add some rust colour. I tend to find that these fueling grids tend to be a little bit rusty, and then over a period of time they tend to get a little bit oily, but I tend to use a matte black just simply because it goes on really well. But I do the underside first, as you can see, I haven't done the underside on this one because I literally ran out of paint, so I had to do the top one to make sure. But it's just make sure that you don't see any bare model board, so hence why I do normally do the undersides. But paint it in the colour of your choice and then put it to one side, and then it just then needs to be fitted to your track. Now I've got a piece of Code75 track here that I was making sure that these fitted, and obviously I've done the extension parts. I'll show you how to make those in a minute. It's just literally exactly the same as what we've just done, and obviously this section goes then and it fits over your sleepers and into position. Now Code75, the I can't remember what they're called now, clips that go onto the sleepers are a little bit smaller than the Code100, so you've got a little bit more play on a Code75. On a Code100 track it tends to fit in there and not budge, but I would certainly recommend this is glued into position once you're happy with it. Whether you want to gravel ballast underneath, it's entirely up to you, but I think there was mainly a sort of like a gully underneath that allowed for any fuel or oil to disappear from. I don't think it was ballasted, maybe at the very ends, hence where the extension side parts, which will also be available, are slightly a bit longer, because when they came in from the track it was ballasted and then all of a sudden it stopped, so you had the walkway carried on for a little bit, but you can trim that if you want to. But once painted, they literally sit on top of the sleepers, but ideally you want to glue it in position and then put a heavy weight on top to make sure it fits in. But you've got to obviously remember to make sure that if you're having the extension side pieces as well, that all these cross pieces match up. So make sure before you fit them, obviously the center piece goes in between the sleepers, and obviously the extension bit slots over the side, so you need to make sure that they are glued in the correct position. You don't want them being out of line, it'll look a little bit daft. So we've completed the center section. I'll now show you how to do the extension parts. As per the center section, there are a few places where these are held on, and there's some engraved lines, so you can see those. Cut them out and those, put them on one side, so you've got the external fueling part and then the two sections that fit to the extension. You'll see there is a smaller piece and a wider piece. Now the smaller piece fits on the inner side, so the center holes, it fits in there. Then the larger side fits on the outer side. Now there are no joining dividers on these. I did originally have them, and I tried it, but they are extremely tight. It's about, I think, 1.8 millimeters wide, so you're dealing with something extremely small. And once these are glued and in place and then put on your track, they're not going to go anywhere. So we decided to alleviate that, and obviously when you come to fit these and put them on your piece of track, you're going to be ballasting up to them anyway. So right, so I'm going to take all these bits out and then we'll be ready to glue. Right, so that's all the parts. So just need to make sure that you turn your fueling grid upside down, and we're gluing on the underside. The lips on these ones, obviously the smaller side, it's very thin, so we're going to run a bit of glue along that. Be very careful how you add this to the center, and obviously it just slots in the end, and then in all the subsequent holes use your tweezers. Do the center one first and then fit the outer one. Now the outer one, because obviously they are on the edges, you might find this a little bit more awkward, so it might be worth finding a block of wood or something just to lean against, so you know that they fit flush inside those holes, because I think it's 0.5 mil. They're not massive holes, so you've got to make sure that these fit flush, otherwise you're not going to fit to the edge, especially if you buy the footpath extension part as well. So hopefully it'll make sense when I show you when I've done it, and I'll glue those, come back to show you. Right, I hope you can see that okay. The light's not great in here today for some reason, but I've added that, put them in the holes, You'll see that that's fitted flush up against the fueling grid nicely and on the ends. So I'm going to allow that one to dry because I don't really want to move that one, so give it 5 minutes to dry, and then we'll add the one on the outer side. So I'm going to need to find a small piece of wood to lean up against once I've added the glue, so I know when I can literally push that wood against it, knowing it's going in. But just don't add too much excess glue, otherwise you'll end up gluing that to the side, and we don't want that. So there's that inner section, that's all done. I'm going to allow that to dry for a few minutes before we add the second section. On the extension grids where the ends slot into these little holes, you want to be adding a little dab of glue inside those holes, so when you come to add the side piece, hopefully when you press it together it will keep it in those holes. Right, that's my outside ones done. It is very tricky to do these. It's very fiddly. You can pick them up and use your fingers to push them in and hopefully hold them there, and again get your tweezers and literally hold in place and then push them in. And then what I've done, I've picked it up, make sure they've gone in, and then afterwards just got my cocktail stick, dab of glue, and literally gone on the insides where the joining lines are and dot a bit of glue in each one just to hold it there. After about 5-10 minutes it will set, but just make sure you pick it up that they're as close to the edge as possible. They really are fiddly to do, so just take your time on these. And then obviously once they're dry and you've allowed them to dry for quite a while, you can then paint them exactly as you did the center section. And here's one I did earlier. Again, I've done the underside of this one because you're likely to see obviously the outside here if you're not buying the walkway parts, and then obviously on the top fueling grids as well. And obviously then they will slot in. They literally, if I can grab hold of my piece of track and the bit I did earlier, they literally slot inside here up against, and they just lean on top of your sleepers. But again, as we mentioned earlier, once you've glued your center piece in, you need to make sure, so if I grab hold of one that I've painted, stick it in, you need to make sure that those divided lines are spot on. So when you glue this one on, just make sure they're level. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to allow these ones to dry. I've got to do the other side. I've only just done one at the moment. We'll do the other one, allow those to dry, and then we can go and paint all those, and then they're ready to fit on your layout. On my second one, they're a little bit trickier to get in for some reason. I don't know why, but obviously I've got them in. And all I've done then is added tiny little dots of glue along each of the dividing lines just to make sure it's held in place. So I'll most probably give this one a few extra minutes before I add the outer section. They are extremely tricky to add, so just take your time. They are quite fragile, so just make sure that you do it gently with your tweezers and push them into the holes, and hopefully they'll go in there. I've made the holes slightly bigger than the actual noggin that goes in, so they should slot in there okay, but just take your time. And there we have our center and extension fuel grids. They are drying. Allow those to dry for a good hour or so, and then you can paint them. Don't need to prime them. It will take to a spray can really nicely, so I use matte black, and this is what one looks like when you've added it to your track. I have not glued any of this in place, but obviously I would do if I was putting it on a layout. I've also shown you here the optional footway sections that can be purchased as well, just to show how it looks. And obviously they do go a bit further than the extension and center grid, so you can then ballast in here and carry on so it blends in, or you can simply trim to fit. It's entirely up to you. So that's how they look, and again you can use multiple fueling grids, so basically add another one put it in, it drops in. If it allow me to, for some reason that won't go in, and then you just add as many as you like, just keep going. But I think most people will need just the one, possibly two. So that concludes the video. The only bit of advice is when you're doing those extension pieces, they are extremely fiddly. If you can add them to the side, pushing them in, there's no easy way. You just got to use your fingers and just hope you can slot them in, and just go from one end down to the other, and just take your time. So that completes that. And any questions or queries, please don't hesitate to get in contact with us via our Facebook page, via Messenger, or our contact form on the website at railwaylaserlines.co.uk. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll catch you again very soon. Bye bye.